Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another Learn With Me video where we will discover new violin tips and tricks together. I hope you're doing amazing today. As you can see, I'm in a little bit of a different environment right now, and if you've seen my last video, you will know that I had to come back to New York temporarily just to move out of my apartment. So behind the scenes, there's lots of boxes and stuff. So yeah, I'm back here after 5 months of not being here, and it feels really good. Since I have a little bit of time during quarantine, I wanted to talk to you about music edition publishers and how to make a wise choice in choosing the right one. So this video is in preparation to my next Learn With Me series video, which will be about how I personally start learning new repertoire. Choosing the right edition and the right publisher for your music is always the first step of learning a new piece, so it is a crucial step in the process. As always, please don't forget to hit that like button if you feel like you learned something new today, and let's get straight into the video. So just as a little side note, I do want to say that today I will be talking about classical sheet music publishers. So essentially book publishers, but for classical sheet music. Throughout this video, when I say edition or publisher, they essentially mean the same thing, and those are companies that print their own version of a composer's work. Also, I am aware that there are many more publishers for piano music in particular or other instruments, and while I like to consider myself a musician with a somewhat broad understanding of other instruments, at the end of the day I am a violinist, and this is going to be from a violinist's experience. So you might ask yourself, why is it so important to choose the right publisher? There are so many, just choose one. Reasons for us to lean towards one edition more than the other is very often just because our teacher told us this is a good edition, just use it. However, we need to ask ourselves, is this a reputable publisher? Because at the end of the day, you're the one on stage presenting your interpretation of a composer's work. So don't be shy when it comes to doing your research so that you can make responsible choices when it comes to sheet music versions. So now, there are several factors to consider when it comes to choosing the right sheet music publisher. One category, for example, is that publishing companies sometimes have a connection to specific composers. That can be, for example, a personal history that ties the composer to a company, which can be a sign of approval or disapproval from the composer. We will talk about a list of major publishing companies in a second, but an example for that would probably be that the founder of the Durand edition, which is a French edition, went to the same school as Camille Saint-Saëns or Maurice Ravel. Knowing that connection in the back of my head makes me tend to choose Durand over any other edition. Another example would be that it is no secret that Ludwig van Beethoven had a close working relationship during his lifetime with the publisher Breitkopf and Härtel. Another factor in this category would probably be nationality and culture. For example, when I'm looking for a publisher for a German composer for a German piece, I will most likely reach for a German edition, a German publisher. Or if a composer is US American or has immigrated to the US and has spent the majority of their life in the US, I will definitely look into American editions as well. But that actually also has another factor, which brings me to the next category, the publishing exclusivity. So not all publishers have the right to publish any kind of composer they want. In that case, you actually don't have many options, or you only have one option of an edition to choose from. When that happens, of course, you take what you can get and you do your own research in finding out if what the composer wrote is actually printed in the edition as well. The next topic would be annotated interpretation. So very often music publishers will actually hire or collaborate with a renowned musician to lend them a hand in terms of bowings and fingerings and just giving their own touch to the music. For example, when you look at Beethoven's sonatas from the Handley edition, you will see that it says fingering and bowing of violin part by Max Rostal. Now you can make the choice to take the advice of the bowing and the fingering of renowned violinist Max Rostal, or you can leave it. He was an amazing violinist with incredible achievements after all, so we might learn a thing or two from his annotations. So meanwhile, you have the choice and the option to look at other music publishers of the same work but with another person annotating them. It's really about knowing the options and taking inspiration from everywhere and then choosing what makes sense to you. Having bowing and fingering annotations is a really great thing for students for up to 20 years old, I would say, and it's absolutely crucial for younger students. There's just one little slight problem with that, and that is Trustworthiness. Sometimes a publisher or a violinist who revises it completely changes the bowings and the structure of a piece and adds notes and stuff like that, which obviously is not what the composer himself wrote. So for example, if a composer wanted the bowing in a certain way, but the publisher publishes it in a completely different bowing, it can actually change the phrasing and therefore how it sounds. I'll give you one example for that right now. So as you can see, this is Bach's handwriting. This is his original manuscript, and the reason we don't read out of this is because it is not so easy to read, but it is a great resource to have a look at and to do your research. You can pause the video right now to have a longer look at it, because we are going to look at two other versions. So this next version, as you can see, this is the Bärenreiter Verlag Urtext. So we are going to talk about Urtext in a second, but all they did was basically take what Bach wrote and put it into a clean version that you can read really easily. The red markings are what I personally added on my own. Sometimes I make the conscious choice to split the bow so that I have more bow available to me and so that my sound can actually carry through a modern concert hall, which is usually bigger than back in Bach's days. When I split the bow, however, like in bar 2 or bar 3, I make sure that it sounds as connected and as original as possible. We're also going to talk about this in just a second, but Bach was not a violinist, and even though he knew it and he wrote for the violin, certain bowings are almost physically not possible. So now in the next version, this is the Breitkopf and Hertel edition. I personally don't read out of this one. It's not Urtext, and therefore there are a few changes. So for example, you can see that certain bowings, such as in bar 2, where I put the circle, it does not match what Bach actually wrote, or they even left out a trill in bar 4. Basically, all the markings that I put into this version is to highlight where the editor did not consult with the original version. Along those lines, if a Baroque piece, for example, is historically played in the first and third positions and very rarely goes up in positions. Now, if an edition tells you to do everything in the 6th and 7th position, that actually changes the stylistic identity of a piece, which in my book is a huge no-go. So these concerns actually lead me to the last and probably the most important factor, which is publisher trustworthiness and reputation. With that, I need to mention Urtext Editions. Urtext Edition is essentially a German description that translates into original version. It means that the composer wrote the music and the publisher just printed it without altering it. Whenever that is available, I either read from it, definitely, or at the very least, I will do my research with it. So sometimes certain publishers actually specialize in certain composers. For example, the Bärenreiter Publishing Company has a whole series called the Neue Mozart-Ausgabe, which is a complete series of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's works, which are Urtext Edition. Given that Bärenreiter's reputation is to be one of the leading classical music publishing companies out there, as well as them print publishing it as an Urtext edition, makes me trust them a lot more that they have not distorted or illogically altered Mozart's writing. There's one side note to this that I would like to add, which is that certain composers might not have actually learned or know an instrument super well. So for example, Brahms is an incredible composer, but he's a pianist and doesn't necessarily know how a violin works. So what he did with his iconic violin concerto, which is so beautiful, he actually got his close friend, an incredible violinist back in the day, Joseph Joachim, to help him write the fingerings, the bowings, and just give him advice on what is even physically possible on the violin. So remember, we want to play and interpret the music that the composer wanted us to play, not necessarily what a publisher or an editor felt like was right in that given moment. As a rule of thumb, always stay true to text. Now we will get into a list of publishers and editions, but before we do that, if you've liked this video so far, please don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps me out. So let's continue. So now I can finally tell you why I love the Henley edition so much. I'm not sponsored, by the way, I wish. So out of this list, I have used most of them and definitely heard of all of them. First and foremost, the Henley edition, which is an Urtext edition. This edition is my go-to edition for many occasions. So whether it be just having to run to the library and grabbing something, I always try to find the Henley for a sight reading party or for lessons or to just fact check some music. Because not only do they have an incredible preface that looks like this, and they have a preface in German, English, as well as French. This preface gives you a bit more insight on the historical and analytical side of a piece. It will also sometimes tell you what the composer was experiencing or going through while he wrote a specific work, which makes you understand the work a lot better. So the Paganini caprices, for example, have, of course, the music itself, but also the preface as well as annotations on the interpretation. It actually gives you a bit of an idea for each caprice that is written, why it is considered difficult and what makes it difficult and how it has traditionally been done and historical facts and stuff like that. For me personally, Henley is really high on the trustworthiness scala because their reputation is to be super transparent and to give you background information on a piece as well. So now the next publishing company would probably be Bärenreiter, which is one of the biggest publishing companies out there with offices in Europe as well as the US. They are famous for having a massive selection of different composers and different works to choose from. I would definitely be more than happy if I saw Bärenreiter Urtext in my library or elsewhere, and I would also choose Bärenreiter for a majority of particularly German composers. So this is only about 20% of my sheet music, and it's extending, but the rest is at home in Switzerland. But another big edition that I've grown up with is the Peters edition, another sizable publishing company with a German tie, or Breitkopf and Hertel, also a big name because they have been around for so long. They're, I think, one of the oldest publishing companies to exist. Then of course there's the French Durand edition, which I have mentioned previously, with Saint-Saëns and Ravel. I think they're actually also one of those publishing companies that have certain works with exclusivity, so you won't find other editions for certain pieces. I would definitely have a look at Durand edition for French music, absolutely. Then of course there's also the International Music Company, which is a massive name. I would definitely use them for showpieces and virtuoso pieces. They have a really good selection in those prints. There are so many editions out there, so let me just recite you a few. For example, there's the Wiener Urtext, the Schott Music, a Universal Music Company, of course Boosey and Hawkes, Boston Music Company, and Dover edition. There's so many different ones. By the way, if you don't already know about this, there's a free website called IMSLP, imslp.org to be particular. It is a free music library online where you have such a wide selection of different publishers and editions for the majority of classical music out there. Again, this is not sponsored. This is your chance to have a great resource for free sheet music, so make use of it. So with all of these options, you might ask yourself, I can't decide, should I just use several editions at the same time? Yes and no. Let me explain. Since different editions have different types of annotations and fingerings and bowings and all of that, you should definitely do your research and gather inspiration from several sources. Try out new fingerings that fit your anatomical structure, or look at different prefaces and information sheets and resources from different publishers, just so you know a little bit more background about a piece. Look out for certain annotations and markings that might be in one version or in one edition, but not in another, and ask yourself, why is that? What did the composer want? By all means, do all of those things. They're very important. But to organize your mind, I recommend deciding for a publisher quite early on in the process of learning new repertoire, simply because it can cause a lot of confusion and inefficiency if you have several versions swirling around you all the time. Alright, so these were my 2 cents on sheet music publishers, and I really wish that someone had told me this in a summarized version a little bit earlier in my life, but this is just what I have picked up along the way throughout the years and wanted to share it with you guys. If you have any tips or remarks about publishers or how to choose a publisher, please drop them in the comments down below so we can all learn something new today. As always, if you liked today's video or learned something new today, please hit that like button and subscribe if you don't want to miss next week's video. Please take care, wear a mask, and see you next time. Bye!